I'm here pleased to be joined by Fernando Fernandez, a professor at College of the Sequoias, who teaches classes including soil science, ornamental horticulture, horticultural science, um, diseases in ornamentals, and greenhouse and nursery production. He has a bachelor's and master's from Fresno State University. And I'm here to ask questions about more about how he got into his career and what types of things he sees in his career that might help somebody that wants to become a professor. Um, I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to help me with this. My first question was how you decided on your major in school and how you kind of found your passion.
Well, that started probably within the family. I was born and raised on a farm, starting with dairy and then moving from dairy to plant science. So I do have the farming background. I went to Parlier High School and was involved in the ag program there. Also competed as an FFA member. And that took me to the UC Kearney Field Station, Research Station right in Parlier. And that's how I ended up making the link between agriculture and science, and understanding that agriculture was a little bit more than just production side.
Mm-hmm.
And having the ability to go to the research station and have the scientists there and farm managers allow the students of Parlier High School get involved hands-on. I think that was one of the triggers.
That's
And
really cool.
having Kings River Community College about 10 minutes away from home, being a good at school, that played a role also.
Yeah, that's really cool how I think community colleges around here are trying to focus on programs like that so that you can kind of get your foot in without having to make these big leaps, and you kind of get in a little quicker, I guess. I really liked what COS was doing with plant science since I started back. I started COS when I was like 2013. I was real fresh out of high school, and I thought I wanted to do plant science. I switched my major up a couple times. And since coming back in 2020, I realized how big the Tulare farm has been expanded at COS. And I was really excited to
Yep.
see all the programs and get my foothold.
And that's one of the intents of the community college to get that first step for many students that might not have the opportunity to go straight into a four-year institution. When I graduated Parlier High School, I was valedictorian, so I knew I was going to go somewhere, and I was accepted to UC Davis, Cal Poly, Fresno. You know, the choice to go to Ridley was my choice, not because the opportunity was not there.
Yeah. See, I wish looking back, I wish I would have been more involved with FFA or like got my roots started in high school. But the programs that I have experienced at COS and like Fresno State, it's really nice to have somebody like not from a agricultural family, but I really want to be involved with help strengthening our ag systems and working in the industry. So
Very good.
it's nice to be able to learn from people like you. Um, the second question is going to be, what jobs did you have before becoming a professor, if any? I remember from your class, I believe you said you were a farm advisor.
Yes, farm manager.
Oh, farm
Well, I
manager.
started as an assistant farm manager at Kings River College for 2 years, and then I also became assistant farm manager at Fresno State when I transferred to Fresno State. Then I became a farm manager and farm advisor before getting my two teaching credentials I got into education by chance. Also, after I completed my two master's degrees in soils and plant science, horticulture, I got into education basically to pay for my graduate school.
Oh, sweet.
But it was a huge interest to me because I was teaching adult school at the time. I was teaching math and English, some writing, and then decided to get a high school teaching credential to teach ag. And I did. I have two teaching credentials. So I started teaching at Strathmore High School. Was there for a few years. We opened a program. From there, I opened a program at Farmersville High School. Uh, I was the founding advisor for Farmersville High School. And then when I was in Farmersville High School, I was still doing farming with the family because my family still farms. Decided to teach at COS at the same time. So I've been teaching at COS since 97,
Oh, wow.
1997, and at the same time teaching high school ag. So I was an FFA advisor for about 11 or 12 years, something like that. It's something that came natural to do. So it wasn't, just came about. Sometimes you don't choose something, that something chooses you.
Yeah.
Teaching at two different places was very natural to me. And then at the same time, I was still teaching adult school. I opened an adult school in Strathmore, and I opened an adult school in Farmersville.
Oh, wow.
At the same time that I was teaching COS and high school ag.
Dang.
Still working at the family farm. So that doesn't,
Yeah.
that's still a passion to keep that side of my experience going as much as I can. Because it just gives you a different perspective outside of the classroom.
Sure. It really like honed in your time management skills and everything. It's
Yep.
a lot
Yep.
of it's a lot of responsibility. Um, I my Zoom, I didn't realize that I needed to be upgraded to do longer than a certain time. So I have 8 minutes left before it kicks me off. So I'm gonna
We can relink. Just send me
oh,
another
I
link.
see. Sweet. And then I'll stitch them together. Um, Another question I had was more involving how you use biology and other science in your career and career path that you've taken. One of them, we kind of talked about how you found your interest in agriculture, but ornamental horticulture itself, I know has a little bit different specifics. How did you, was there something that made you focus on one side or the other, or did you have a
Yes, plant science and horticulture are basically um, sciences that run hand in hand. I see them very similar. If we wanted to find something that puts them apart at some point, I would say that plant science is geared towards the production side. So large production of crops for food and fiber. And then the ornamental horticulture, it is the same plant physiology, is the same biology, is the same nutrition, is the same water, but the plant material is different because now we're focusing on plants that are selected and grown for a different purpose. Now we're looking at plants that are grown for the beauty of the plant, for the environmental use of the plant, and not necessarily for food. Now, within horticulture, there's still some plants that are grown for food, but a very low scale. So, for example, a garden, somebody might plant a few plants in their garden, and that's not really plant science. That's more the horticulture side. small scale gardening belongs in the horticulture side.
Mm.
And when we say plant science, you're looking at large scale production. That's probably the primary differences. Everything else from nutrition to water to pruning to selection, plant breeding and all that, they're identical.
That's good to know because I still haven't taken I haven't taken a horticulture class yet, but I'd be interested to take some plant propagation. I don't think they offer it at Fresno State, but I might have to come back to COS to take.
Yeah, the plant propagation that I teach here, and I make a very specific note in that class that students that are coming from the plant science side, if they want to focus on a specific species or a group of species, they may do so because the type of propagation is very similar to other species within horticulture. The technique is going to be the same. The only difference is going to be the species. So once you learn the technique, you can propagate multiple species, whether it be species related to plant science, such as citrus, right, in the production of citrus, or you're propagating trees for shade.
I
But
see.
the technique is going to be the same.
That's super cool. Um, so another question I have is, in your opinion, what would be one of the most important aspects of plant management? Um,
Plant management needs to start with soil. In my view, we need to start with soil. Once you have soil under control, move to water. You need to have water and soil as your foundation. Once you have water and soil, then start looking at plant nutrition. Plant nutrition is going to be key. You want healthy plants, you need to be on top of plant nutrition. Without plant nutrition, plants are going to get sick.
and that water
And
and
we
soil.
tend to move into the direction of pesticides before we do plant nutrition. In my view, that's we're missing something there. We got to go plant nutrition, and then we're still going to deal with pests and diseases. But another factor that plays a role in management pests and diseases is going to be proper pruning and spacing, whether it be in plant science, growing an orchard, or in the landscape, growing trees for shade. If you don't do proper pruning, proper spacing, you're going to have problems with pests and diseases. 98% of the problems with pests and diseases, whether it be production in ag or in a landscape, can be resolved with nutrition, proper pruning, and proper spacing.
That's super awesome to hear. I totally agree. I have had a couple, like when I worked at a soil lab, I actually worked at Valley Tech for a little bit. Talked with a PCA there, and he said like a lot of PCAs going in don't have the proper like nutrition aspect in mind. And that makes total sense that you got to start with the soil, see what you're working with, how it's set up. If you need extra amendments, the water also is going to be adding nutrients or minerals. That's super awesome to hear. And then the spacing is a great point that you made, because if there's not enough space, you're going to have not a lot of wind passing through. It's going to make a small microclimate and maybe help fungus grow. Or
Yep.
that's really
Oxygen movement, air movement through those trees, is going to control most of the pest problems that we have, most of the disease problems that we have.
super rad. One last question before we get the second session going. In recent years, we've been seeing articles about topsoil in California having like headlines like, "Oh, the topsoil has 60 years left of harvest." Can the topsoil truly be depleted, or is there something that we can do to prevent that by maybe reducing tilling or changing the way that we are managing certain farms that have seen.
Yeah, that's an alarm that is being sounded before. You know, I've heard it over the last 50 years. So it's not an alarm that is brand new. It's just an alarm that somebody has reset. I'm not sure if you understand my comment, but
Totally.
there's been multiple books written about how we are destroying soil. The biggest challenge with soil is that soil takes a very long time to create. So if we're looking at topsoil, it's going to take us at minimum decades to rebuild a topsoil. Minimum decades. It could be hundreds of years, it could be thousands of years. Now, are we going to lose it all at once? No. That cannot happen because we still have very good farm managers that are farming a very large portion.
Okay, so
So let me continue with that last question that you posed. So if we look at the number of growers that are doing the right thing or doing things better than others, that's going to take us a long time. So that's a positive thing. The other positive thing is that people are beginning to understand that we got to take care of soils and water. I think that the overall understanding of the large population is consensus that we got to take care of soils and water to have food and water for everyone.
yeah.
So that's going to take a long time. What we do need is more growers to begin implementing the idea that we need to keep the amount of organic material in soils greater than what we have in the past in order to use that microbiology in the soil to grow plants healthier, to use less chemical fertilizers, to use less pesticides. That's going to take a few years to change a mindset, but I think it's happening now. I think there's a change in generation or a shift in generations managing soils. We're going from the older generation that was managing soils for production, stepping out, retiring, and now we have a new generation stepping in with different education, different skill sets, different mindset. And that's going to give us the push to begin understanding that organic material in the soil needs to be there, that we might not get the yield that we're wanting, but it's a yield that is going to give us still a profit, and that it's to our advantage to have a little bit less yield, a little bit less profit to start, but keep that soil as a natural resource moving forward for the next few generations. The other shift that is happening now is that people are beginning to realize that it might take a little bit more from everyone's part, maybe pay 5 cents more, 10 cents more for a product that is locally produced than to bring food from other countries. And if we're willing to support that grower, local grower, then that local grower is going to be willing to do less yield, but get the same amount of profit, therefore conserving that soil for future generations. And that mentality is taking place now. I see it as I talk to people, as I visit places. And that's a good positive movement. We're moving in the right direction.
Totally. I feel like that headline got a lot of people that were in plant science in school, at least from around me, my colleagues that I've seen. I've heard them talk about like things that aren't it has a positive outlook towards it, instead of saying like, oh well, this is inevitable. It's saying like, oh, we can find solutions, and it kind of empowers them to look for
Absolutely.
solutions
We just
rather
got to
than,
be creative. I mean,
yeah.
every generation needs to think of new ways to step forward and solve the issues at hand. We can't say, well, you know what, the problem is so big that we're just gonna fold and not even try.
Yeah.
That's why agricultural research is needed. That's why horticultural research is needed, ongoing, not just today or tomorrow, but it needs to be ongoing.
That's awesome to hear. I wrote a paper on the farm bill that is going to be worked on next year once they get back into session and stuff like that. And it had some changes to how EBT was funded, but those changes are so that it can fund research and um, climate sustainability and like certain things in keeping the forests managed. And it had a bunch of different little things that it was trying to fund research and stuff. It still needs to be hammered out in Congress, but
Yeah, farm bill needs to be cleaned up before it moves forward. But it is the foundation of our even though it says farm bill, there's so many other items included in there that most people don't understand that. And,
yeah.
and the name farm bill, it's a misnomer now because the bulk of the expenses are not related to farming.
Yeah, the farm food and national security, and it's like, yeah, it's a trip. But another question I wanted to ask you is a set of questions more related towards chemistry. Um, the class I'm taking currently is an organic chemistry class, and I've started to understand more about chemicals that would be used in agriculture. Um, One of the questions I wanted to know about was when taking land that is not in agricultural production, but could potentially be in agricultural production, what challenges would someone have in expanding, let's say, like a grassland or a non-used field into an agriculture?
Reclaiming soil for production ag.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. The biggest challenge when land is being reclaimed is it's going to be the low cation exchange capacity of those soils because those soils have not been used for farming or they've been isolated from farming for a long time. So the cation exchange capacity of those soils is going to be fairly low. We usually find that it's fairly low. Opposite to that, the pH of those soils tends to be high.
Mm,
So now we got another chemistry question. How do we manage to lower the pH of those soils to the point that it's economically feasible? And that's the key, because if it's not economically feasible, then we can bring those soils back into agricultural production. It's going to cost us too much.
yeah. Take
And
away.
in order to do increase VC and lower pH, we need to find a product that is going to increase the microbiology of those soils or somehow inoculate those soils with microbiology to help us do the two things that or to fix the two primary problems, the low ECE or CEC and then the high pH. With the addition of organic material, we know that we can increase the microbiology. Once the microbiology gets going on those soils, we see a change in pH. Now, do we still have to add maybe like a sulfur compound? Absolutely, because that's the way to speed up the process of lowering the pH. But that whatever we use needs to be um, somewhat safe or relatively safe for the microbiology. Because
Well,
the
if not
key
good
here
for
is
you.
going to be having that microbiology to get those soils back. Once we get that microbiology back, we start getting that soil pH to a reasonable level, the cation exchange capacity of those soils is going to increase. Now we have nutrition back in those soils. And as long as we have water, those soils are going to become productive again. Now,
Yeah.
how do we put enough organic material into those soils? Initially, to get this microbiology back, it's going to be either cover crops, compost, something, humic acid, something that is going to change the chemistry of that soil to the point that the biology can thrive. And water. We definitely need to have that water available. Without water, the chemistry of the soil is not going to change.
It'll never flush.
Yeah, it'll never be there to have enough chemical reactions to move that sulfur product to replace your calcium, your magnesium, your sodium that are creating that high pH problem.
Man, that's going to be a big it's going to be a big challenge, but I hope
That
they
was part of the work that I did in my work for Fresno State as a researcher.
wow.
And you know, at first glance, you're doing this work thinking that, man, how am I going to make a difference with the work that we're doing? But once you realize that you have found a solution, not the solution, but a solution, and you have enough support of the solution or the solution that you're bringing forward, and people begin to practice that solution, and your recommendation is taking hold and it's effective, people will move into it. Particularly growers that they don't care about the organic chemistry, they don't care about the inorganic chemistry in the soil, they don't care about how things work in the microbiology. What they care is the bottom line. Am I going to have a good yield if I plant this in that soil? And if the answer is yes, then they'll support you. It is your responsibility to understand the chemistry, to understand the biology, to understand those processes, because it's all science-based. But the greatest support needs to come from the people that are putting the money into those projects, which is the grower, right? It is the owner of the land. It is the person that is investing in the planting of those crops.
So when taking upon a project like that, you really need to be managed and be able to explain the process
And as a scientist, you have to hold your ground. You cannot be hesitant in the decisions that you make. Once you make the decision, hey, let's go for it, document it. You still need to document it, because that's what science, that's one of the steps of science. You gotta have everything documented. Because once we document it and it works, now the other task of a scientist is translate it in a way that the common farmer, that the common grower will understand it.
That's great. Transfer it into a communicable form that everybody could understand.
Yep.
And implement. That's really awesome. Another question I have is, what labs do you show in some of your classes that, or what labs do you conduct in some of your classes that show the importance of chemical reactions in soil-plant relations?
In multiple classes, well, soils, plant science 1, OH1, OH 109, which is the landscape management class. In multiple classes, we do soil sampling and soil pH, measuring soil pH. Even though in the nursery side, the soil is more of an organic substrate that we create from individual components. The pH remains the same. The sampling, it's a little different, but measuring pH is going to be the same. The effect of pH in production species is the same as the effect of in ornamental species. So that remains the same. And then a lab in testing for salts. Because particularly in the nursery, the salts are affecting every time we water plants in containers, we're affecting the growth of those plants. Particularly in a well, for example, here on campus, we have the well that it's already pumping water high in salts. So every time we water, we're adding salts to that substrate. So that becomes a challenge. So a lab to measure that, and a lab to coach the students on how to deal with using at least one irrigation of excess water to leach out excess salts that accumulate in that container. Plant nutrition, multiple labs in plant nutrition, starting with the selection of fertilizers. In multiple classes in horticulture, we go in detail as to how to select. Once we understand the grade of the fertilizer, once we understand the analysis of the fertilizer, okay, how do we go about selecting fertilizer to target individual species? Not just go over to the garden center and pull something out of the shelf.
Yeah.
So multiple lessons in plant nutrition. As I mentioned before, plant nutrition needs to be part of your health management of that plant.
Those are great tips. I really like the whole soil sampling and the testing of it. And when we pulled our extractions, I thought it was a really, really cool set of labs. It really taught me how pH actually, what it's actually describing. Like I didn't know that it was percent hydrogen until,
Yep.
Yeah.
The other thing that we tend to forget is that, you know, when you're looking at the pH scale, you know, yeah, it's 1 unit difference between a 7 and an 8 moving to the alkaline side, but that 1 unit difference is 10 times more, right?
Totally.
And then if we go to the 9, now it's 100 times more. And it's the same way with acidity. And that's why cation exchange it's so important to understand, and how the pH is going to affect the nutrition of that plant.
That's awesome. I really was excited to take you as one of my first agricultural classes or plant science classes. It really set me up well for a lot of my classes leading on, especially like with irrigation and stuff like that. And I was really stoked. Another question, how much chemistry or organic chemistry did you take while going through your education?
5 chemistry classes.
Oh man.
5 chemistry classes, including 2 organic chemistries.
Oh, that's rad. What was your favorite part, or did you have any like troubles with chemistry at first, or did you like it?
Just like any other person going into chemistry, you know, it's that science that if you don't understand the periodic table and how the elements are organized within the periodic table, it could be challenging. But once you start seeing connections, then you start realizing how things work. And to me, I can do chemistry in my head. I don't have to mix anything now. I can do chemistry in my head because not that I can see, but I can visualize reactions, right? Now, once you get to that step that you can see reactions in your head, now it's a lot easier when you start doing chemistry physically, like mixing fertilizers, right? Fertilizers is nothing more than chemistry. And what I realized about particularly organic chemistry, once you start looking at isotopes of a given element and you see how different isotopes behave, just by changing a few carbons or a few spots, then you realize, oh, now I understand why biology is so important. Because there's going to be certain types or certain mixes of a chemical element that are going to be really good for the microbiology. And there's some that are going to be detrimental to the microbiology. I think the biggest take for me was understanding how that chemistry is affecting not only microbiology, but the result of the microbiology affecting the plants.
Wow.
Because the exudates that are produced by the microbiology, all these chemical reactions that take place between roots, soil, and microbiology, all those products that are created by microbiology simply because of the soil chemistry, and then they are returned back to the plant.
Mm.
That's, to me, that's fantastic. Now I understand nitrogen better. I understand the phosphates better. I understand the sulfates better. Now I can find a product that is going to give me the ability to create something that is going to change pH very quickly. For example, in nursery management, now we have multiple products that in 3 weeks we can change the pH of a given soil. Even though we have planted the plant already in a container, we can still treat it and change that pH very quickly and bring that health of the plant back very, very quickly.
Wow.
To me, chemistry, it's another foundation of soils. Soil is the foundation of plants. Chemistry is the foundation of soil.
Mm. Man, that's a really good way to put it because as I'm learning more, like chemistry, when I first started taking it, I realized it's the building blocks of life. When I started taking organic chemistry, I realized that there can be these slight variations of almost the same molecule that
Yep.
completely change how it's either reacting or being left alone. And that's really interesting. I need to remember that because with microbiology, being involved with ag, any slight change might change their environment or their optimized
Yeah,
environment.
in landscape, every class that I teach in landscape management, microbiology. Nursery management, microbiology. I keep at least 10 different sources of microbiology on hand because everything is going to be inoculated.
Mm.
If I was farming here at COS, I would be inoculating those soils every time before planting.
There's a guy named Will Harris who lives in Georgia and changed his cattle farm from how his grandpa and father raised it using ammonium nitrate and the industrial way. And he changed it to now he does a fully, I believe it's an organic farm. He's increased his organic matter to 5% or
Mhm.
5 or 7%. And he shows a huge difference between like his neighbor's runoff into the stream and his runoff.
Absolutely.
It's
We got to
incredible.
protect the water.
Yeah. It's wild because he says like from where he is, his neighbor's runoff is affecting all the other neighbors' land because their water that they're taking out of that stream is going into their soil and destroying their microbiome.
Mhm.
And it's incredible to see people changing and sticking with their instinct to make soils more healthy rather than looking
I
for.
have a class that meets this semester on Fridays all day long, and one of their projects was vegetable growing.
Oh wow.
I mean, those vegetables, if you look at those vegetables, what in the world are you putting into this vegetable? You must be blasting them with, fertilizers. No, it's all the microbiology. We started with microbiology in the propagation mix. We moved to microbiology in the potting mix for 4-inch containers, and those plants look like they've been fertilized almost every other day. But no, it's the microbiology just releasing all these compounds, particularly organic compounds, that are become readily available to that plant. Now you have nitrogen readily available. You got phosphorus readily available. You got calcium, magnesium. You got all these elemental nutrients that become readily available to those plants.
And almost a transport system from that mycorrhiza to the plant.
Absolutely.
Working in symbiotic. Wow. That's super rad. That's speaking my language. I want to learn more about it because I don't know enough to know the differences between different soil mycorrhiza or
Just keep at it, keep at it. When you come across an article, grab it and
oh totally.
dissect it.
You told me something really interesting about fungi that or mycorrhiza that can even um, be parasitic to or what was it to roundworms.
Yeah, nematodes, we can control nematodes with fungi.
That's
Yeah.
super interesting. One of my last questions was, what chemical compounds have led to advancements in agriculture, and what potential compounds are being researched now that you've noticed?
Well, the biggest change to agriculture has come through the use of chemical nitrogen. So particularly the urea, those highly soluble forms of nitrogen. And that came about in order to have nutrition available to parts of the world where soil nutrition is very limited. Nitrogen needs to come out from an external source to those parts of the world. In the United States, we still use that form, but we're learning more about alternating the use of nitrogen forms, alternate between nitrate forms and ammonium forms. And now there's variations of that. Probably the next chemical factor would be the chelated forms of iron and zinc for production agriculture. That has changed tremendously the way tree fruit is grown, the way vines or viticulture uses nutrients, because just having those two elements in chelated form to be used foliar, to use a foliar application of, to make sure that we don't get into a limitation of the growth of those plants, and get those plants out of that deficiency zone as quickly as possible. That has had a large economic implication in agriculture. And in terms of the ornamental side, landscape management side, the use of slow release fertilizers, formulating those fertilizers either with a coating, it could be a polymer, it could be something else, to allow the chemical to dissolve very, very slowly and release those nutrients in a longer period of time. That has changed the world of nursery, because in nursery, we grow everything in containers with drainage holes. Every time we water, the excess water is coming through the bottom of that container, through the drainage holes. If we don't use a slow release type base fertilizer, if we use the standard highly soluble fertilizer, everything's going to leach out within 7 days. So we would be fertilizing every 14 days. That's a lot of waste. That would be an enormous amount of waste. So the slow release fertilizer formulations that are available now allow those individuals in the nursery business to fertilize once a year.
Wow.
Once a year. And keep that nutrition within that root ball throughout the year. That has been an enormous economic change in the business. And that is moving into landscape management. Now, if you're in landscape management and you don't understand slow release fertilizers, you need to educate yourself a little bit better, because if not, you're wasting too much nutrition. And what happens in a residential landscape, we tend to water with sprinkler irrigation, and most of the excess water ends up on the street,
Yeah.
which means that if we're over fertilizing, we're over watering, all that water ends up in our drinking water eventually.
Mm,
So we're putting
a
too
good
much
point.
nitrates into our drinking water. To me, those are the salient points in chemistry.
How has that had how has the slow release fertilizer had an effect on research? Because I'm
In
assuming that would
research,
help a lot more have a stable plant rather than having to deal with plants that are having to be fertilized every so often. You would
yeah,
have more.
I think most of the research now is based on the timing of application, and then the dosage.
Mhm.
Uh, and now it's becoming very specific as to whether we use a soil substrate for propagation, or do we use it for, let's say, vegetable production, or the production of trees and shrubs for the landscape, or we use it in a tree that is going to be grown in a 60-inch box for landscape purposes. So it's all about timing, dosage. Most of the research that I've seen as of late is moving in that direction, because we know the chemistry already, and those companies are doing a good job of formulating the chemistry, putting products that the industry needs. But now we need to understand more as to the dosage and the
Mhm.
timing.
That's super interesting. I appreciate it. Um, what I was thinking is like that aspect of having a more stable plant, not having to fertilize it often would probably help reduce independent variables from like other research methods because your plant would be in more of a equilibrium.
Oh, absolutely, because it's getting a constant dosage throughout that period of time, that is really growing really fast in the spring, because there's a difference in growth rate,
Mhm.
spring versus summer versus fall. So in spring, it's getting that constant dosage that it keeps that plant moving. By the time you get to late summer, you know, the dosage is still there, but now is becoming less, because the plant is been using that volume for all this time. So the dosage is being reduced. And then when you get to the fall, now it has a different effect, because in the fall, most plants are now going into the dormancy period. So even though the nutrition is there, it's still much less.
And the
And this is
requirement.
why the research is needed. Do we put it early in the growing season? And do we put it straight on top of the soil? Do we mix it with the soil media when we're blending those soil mixes? When would be the best time to put it in? And then what would be the best dosage to keep that plant healthy throughout the entire cycle?
That's super interesting because I'm sure with each plant, each type of species, it's going to
Yeah,
be.
the findings now, some of the new findings are telling us, don't put slow release on any of the vegetables that you're growing in the nursery.
Wow.
Because what happens with vegetables is that the dosage is so constant that the vegetable just keeps growing and growing and growing, and it doesn't allow that vegetable to go into the mature stage
Oh,
to trigger maturity. So if you have like a tomato or a pepper or a plant that requires you got to go from juvenile stage into adult, and in your adult stage, you need to start with flowering, because without flowers, you don't have tomatoes. Without flowers, you don't have peppers. That plant is so happy that just keeps creating foliage and foliage and foliage, stays at a juvenile stage for too long.
wow.
So we have learned through research that, hey, there's certain species, even within the nursery, that we don't want to use all slow release.
It would change how they're like
Yeah, we cannot substitute
maturity.
the conventional fertilizers that we had in the past for 100% slow release. That's not the goal either.
That's super cool because there's so much, I'm sure, variances in like based on your soil, based on your like your requirement of that certain crop. Like maybe it needs more growth in the summer or more growth during the spring.
Mhm.
And like those applications are really going to be important on the timing. Wow, that's super cool because I could see how maybe like even the polymer would affect how quickly that plant is able to access it or
Yep.
super cool. Um, well, that's most of my questions. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me, and I've learned a lot just from this time.
Anytime, anytime. So just keep going, keep learning, and slowly, slowly, you'll reach your goal.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.